The Davies sisters. Between 1908 and 1924, Gwendoline and Margaret Davies amassed one of the largest collections of late 19th and early 20th century French paintings in Britain. Gwendoline, 1882 to 1951, and Margaret, 1884 to 1963, Davies were the granddaughters of David Davies, a Welshman who amassed a fortune in the shipping and mining industries. In 1907, when Gwendoline came into her inheritance, Margaret would follow in 1909. The sisters were said to be the wealthiest unmarried women in Britain. Their religious upbringing in rural Wales gave them a deep sense of social responsibility, and they chose to use their inheritance for cultural and philanthropic purposes. While there was no real family history of art collecting, the sisters' education was rigorously geared toward such pursuits. Their London school focused on cultural rather than academic study, and they travelled extensively with their governess, Jane Blaker, visiting art galleries and making extensive notes on the collections there. The sisters began to make regular art purchases from 1908, which roughly coincided with the dates of their inheritance. They took advice from various people, including the art dealer Hugh Blaker, the brother of Jane Blaker, and David Crowell Thompson, who was also an art dealer. While it was long assumed that these men were largely responsible for the nature of the sisters' collection, it has recently been accepted that Gwendoline and Margaret retained a far more active role in the process. The sisters' journals reveal their preference for old master paintings. Yet they initially made very few attempts to secure any such works. While the First World War, 1914 to 1918, played a part in the development of the sisters' collection. Their initial response to the war effort was to finance the safe passage of artists from occupied Belgium to Wales, as a humanitarian act, but also with the hope of establishing a vibrant artists' community in the area. Later in the conflict, both sisters decided to volunteer at a canteen for troops at Troyes, in northern France, Gwendoline in 1916, followed by Margaret in 1917. It was tedious and distressing work, which would have a permanent effect on Gwendoline's health. Yet on one of numerous trips to nearby Paris, she visited the Bernheim-Jeune Gallery. Here she acquired two works by Cézanne, Provençal Landscape, and the François Zola Dame. The paintings were shipped directly to Bath, England, where they became the first works by Cézanne to go on display in a public gallery in Britain. Commentators have often described the sisters as unlikely pioneer collectors. Much is made of their isolation in rural Wales and the fact that they didn't make friends with artists or gallery owners. Yet they didn't feel obliged to follow fashionable tastes, and were free to pursue their own preferences. Although they relied on a trusted circle of advisors, they made frequent trips to London and Paris, and also regularly had paintings sent to their home for consideration. By the early 1920s, Gwendoline felt increasingly uncomfortable buying artworks when faced with the poverty and social upheaval created by the First World War. Her philanthropic pursuits then became focused almost exclusively on social causes and the development of the sisters' home at Gregynog Hall into a conference center and venue for the Gregynog Festival of Music and Poetry. Gwendoline made her final art purchase in March 1926. Margaret also stopped collecting around this time, but started again in the 1930s acquiring, on a relatively small scale, work by contemporary British artists. The sisters collected French Impressionist paintings at a time when such art was routinely ignored by individuals and institutions alike. The Gwendoline and Margaret Davies collection, donated in 1951 and 1963 respectively to the National Museum Wales, contains major examples of work by leading French Impressionists. In collecting paintings that they loved, the sisters created a lasting and meaningful cultural legacy for the people of Wales and beyond.